Hey guys, BuildZoid here, and so, recently I got my hands on a 3950X. Thank you, patrons, for funding the purchase. I started overclocking it, and I wanted to figure out, like, hey, where are the fit limits of the silicon? So, because with the 3700X, I didn't bother doing an overclocking video because there's no real point in trying to overclock a 3700X when PBO does such a, well, it's not really a great job, but it does a good enough job, and it's not like you're going to go significantly faster than PBO. But with the 3950X, you got a lot more cores, you got CCXs to play with, and so it's like, oh, here it might actually make sense to run a static overclock because ultimately you probably buy a 3950X because you want all-core performance and don't care that much about single-threaded, because if you cared a lot about single-threaded, why did you buy a 3950X? Anyway, so, trying to figure out the fit limits, the way you'd normally do this is you just max out the PBO limits, and then you see what kind of voltages and temperatures the chip settles for. And, well, that doesn't work. Not on the latest AGSA. That doesn't bloody work at all. So here we are on AGSA 1004B. F10 BIOS on the X572 RS Extreme. Thank you, Gigabyte, for the motherboard. And we're just gonna, set up a nice basic PBO overclock, and we're gonna go 3600 megahertz. Actually, I wanted to show how it performs at stock. So we're just gonna enable the XMP, and then we're gonna run a little bit of Prime 95 and look at what kind of clock speeds and voltages and power consumption we hit. Obviously, you would actually want to run something with an actual performance metric, not like looking at clock speeds in hardware info feels good, but it doesn't actually tell you if you're getting more performance or not. And there are situations in which you can have higher reported clock speeds and lower actual performance because the CPU is actually capable of updating its clock speed basically every millisecond, whereas your monitoring software isn't anywhere near as fast. And then, of course, even if your monitoring software was that fast, your display doesn't update once every millisecond. So you wouldn't be able to see those updates anyway. And also, even if your display did update that fast, your eyes wouldn't be able to keep up. You would just see a blur where the frequency readout is supposed to be. So anyway, right now we're at stock. Now, one thing that sort of is a bit annoying with Ryzen Ryzen 3rd gen? No, Ryzen's, it is 3rd gen. Yeah, it's 3rd gen, but it's called Ryzen 2, which is dumb. But anyway, so yeah, the one annoying thing with Ryzen 3rd gen is if you enable your XMP, it'll actually eat up some of your SoC's power budget, and so if you just leave all your power limits stock, you're actually going to drop below base clock because you're going to be using too much SoC power. So yeah, that's why we're actually going below base clock. Are we going below it? No, base is 3.5, right? I don't remember what base clock is. But it was idling at 3.6. I need to go pick up the box and check. Oh no, it's 3.5 base. I'm dumb. It's fine. I'm dumb. We're leaving that in because, like, well, we all know that I'm dumb already, so it's not like I'm harming my own image. So I'm not harming my image, right? It's like, who actually remembers stock clock speeds for CPUs these days anyway, right? It's all just boost clocks. So yeah, right now we're just running like 117 watts. Less than 1 volt because, well, otherwise it wouldn't be pulling 117 watts. It would be pulling more like 130. And we're running like 3.58 gigahertz, right? So we're going to go 3.58. Actually, 358. Wait, no. 580. Actually, I should just do 7.5 there because it's at 3 point, like the ratio is 0.75. And voltage, we're at 0.93, and we're at 117 watts. And I should have included units there. So, anyway, so that's stock. Now, we're gonna max out the PBO settings. We're gonna get more performance and more power consumption, of course. So, but funnily enough, we are not gonna get the maximum amount of performance because that would be too easy. So, yeah. Smash that delete key like my subscribe button. I can't believe I've actually pulled that plug off for once. I'm getting good at this. Too good. Anyway, accepted. And then we go precision boost over. We set it manual. And then we just blow out the limits to say, okay, no, not that. Right, we just set like a 555 watt power limit, a 555 amp current limit, and a 555 amp current limit again, because there's an electrical design, so the difference between TDC and EDC, well, so power limit is literally how much power the CPU can pull in. TDC is the thermal capacity, how much current can the VRM deliver without overheating. EDC is how much current can the VRM deliver if we ignore the cooling side of the equation, which basically EDC would be the sort of the maximum current rating of your power stages multiplied by however many power stages you have, though arguably if your inductors are low enough saturation current, you would want to stay below the saturation current of each below the saturation current of the inductors, because if the inductors saturate, your voltage regulation goes out the window. But yeah, so anyway, we don't need to worry about that. This board, this is the X570 Aorus Extreme. It's got a VRM very worthy of the name Extreme. And we're just going to max everything out, right? Because the higher you set the limits, the more it'll boost, because it'll be allowed to pull more power, pull more current, clock higher, right? Higher voltages, so it should go faster. And then the funny thing is that on this AGSA version, there's actually a bug with this. Or at least I think it's a bug. It might be an intentional feature on AMD's part, but considering that the older AGSA doesn't do this, I'm starting to think it's more like AMD just accidentally did something and didn't notice. Because it's also like, it just doesn't make sense that, like, the way it behaves. So anyway, we're going to set custom. We're going to punch in 128. 128. So 128K FFT size runs really hot. It's not necessarily, it just runs really hot. So I like using that FFT size because it's ridiculously hot. It pulls a ton of power. And yeah, now we're getting 3.95 gigahertz. So that's pretty nice. And we're getting that at 1.1 volts. So PBO. There. And then we've got, so what is that? So actually it's dropped all the way to 3.9. It's actually boosting even less. Yeah, so the bug is kicking in full power. 1.05 volts. Is it? Well, now it's okay, we'll call that 1.06, right? Or 1.07. And around 171 watts. So, yeah, we're nowhere near thermal limited, we're nowhere near voltage limited, we're nowhere near power limited, but where's the boost? Why are we not boosting more, right? The power limit's 550 watts. We should be pulling not 550 watts, because if the CPU pulled 550 watts, it would actually destroy itself, but a lot more than 170. In fact, with the working version of PBO, the chip can quite easily go over 170 watts. That's no problem. It's just that this latest AGSA, or at least I think it's the latest AGSA, yeah, is a bit bit buggy in its PBO implementation, or at least I think it's a bug. Because, well, let's just restart and tweak a few parameters for PBO. And things will definitely get better. So now we're going to go back into AMD CVS, XFR. Now we're going to punch in 333. So I'm going to make a new entry for that. 3. Oh man, I should open Prime 95 first, because the Prime 95 covers up the run hardware info window. So if I do it in the other order, it actually saves a bit of time. You can tell I spend way too much time just restarting and running Prime 95. Anyway, so yeah, Prime 95 is now running. We're pulling a ridiculous amount of power. It's just 200 watts. Which actually isn't that bad. There's a different set of settings that would be a bit lower. So anyway, now we're getting like, 3975. Yeah, around 3975 megahertz. And around 1.14 volts. Right? Yeah. Oh, well, it's starting to drop already, so I'm going to call that 1.13. The thing is, you need to let the chip warm up a bit. Otherwise, well, like, as it warms up, it'll start boosting less because higher temperatures lead to more leakage. So your boost comes down because of that. Also, the boost algorithm considers the temperature in and of itself as a reason to lower the voltages, which means if you lower the voltages, you need to drop the clocks. And, well, now it's doing more like 3950, so this is no longer correct. We should really... Like, I should time this, but the point... Like, it's really obvious that, like, what I'm getting at is obvious. I'm not trying to be, like, super scientific here with this, because that's not the point. It's supposed to be a quick demonstration. So yeah, that's pulling 195 watts. So we've lowered the limits, and yet we're pulling more power, which already doesn't make a ton of sense, but it gets better. Because we're still nowhere near the limit of what this AGSA can do. And then it gets even better when we change to an older AGSA, and that one boosts higher. So, yeah. And I just spoiled it. But I'm still going to demonstrate it because, well, it's not because I need to fill for time. It's just because I want to show that this is actually the case. Which, it's super convenient to have a motherboard like the X570 Aorus Extreme because it has dual BIOS, which is a feature that costs literally nothing to implement, but most high-end motherboards can't be bothered because apparently finding space on the PCB for a second BIOS chip is really difficult. Anyway, so AMD CBS. And so on this version of the AGSA, the functional TDC and EDC limit is 230. Exactly 230. Or, well, it seems to be around 230. Like, 233 seems to work just fine, but 230 seems to work a little bit better. But 222 seems to boost a little bit less than, say, 230, so... yeah, somewhere in this range, there's a magic point where if you go past this, you start losing performance. And I'm not really interested in testing it in like 2 or 3 watt increments because that would be boring as hell. But I can tell you for sure that 211 boosts less than 230. And then 233 starts to look like it's actually starting to boost less. So, yeah, see, this way I can press run on this, then go to small... and punch in these, and right as I finish typing all of that with my incredible typing skills, hardware info pops up, we can just hit run and start scrolling down. So right now we're doing over 4 gigahertz. It won't actually sustain it because now it's going to run really hot. The voltages are higher. The power consumption is way up. And really, at this point, you'd want to run some kind of performance test. If you had better cooling, it would probably boost a bit more. But hey, now it's actually holding like 4 gigahertz. So that's great. So 230 PBO. And it's running like... Okay, we're not going to core that 4 gigahertz because it's not really doing that on all the cores at the same time. But it's running like 3975... Right, like it's running higher than the 333. That's the main thing. It also is using a ridiculous amount of voltage because the thing about PBO that I really don't like, and it's especially bad with the 3950X as far as I can tell, is that it generally tends to run way more voltage than is necessary for any given frequency. And I know that this chip can basically do like 4.3 gigahertz Prime 95, these exact settings at like 1.2 volts. And this is doing like around 1.2 volts for like not even 4. So PBO is kind of like is pretty inefficient. Now, admittedly, on some other chips, like say the 3700X, it's only off by like 100 megahertz, so you know there it's not a huge deal. But at the same time, it's just like, yeah, if you just want, and also the 3700X is just a lower core count CPU, but this also has like 4 CCXs. So if even the worst CCX can run 4.2 at 1.2 for Prime 95, guess what? Like the best one has to do, like the best CCX could do 4.3 or higher. In which case the 1.2 volts at 4 gigahertz is just a massive waste of power, which is why I don't particularly appreciate the way PBO works. Anyway, so at this point, I think it's abundantly clear that you lower the power, like you can keep lowering the limits, and the power consumption goes up, and the performance goes up with it because the frequency, you know, comes up with it as well. So that's no good already. I'd consider that quite an issue. So now we're going to shut down. I'm going to flick the BIOS switch on the board, and we're going to go straight into AGSA 1003 ABBA, which isn't broken as far as I'm concerned. Like, this might actually be intended behavior from AMD. Maybe they figured out that their old implementation of Boost was far too likely to degrade CPUs or something. I don't know. I don't work at AMD, but also knowing AMD's, well, software history as somebody who's dailied AMD GPUs for a very long time, I think they just have broken power management, because that's something that AMD breaks every so often on a pretty regular basis. Though I've not yet seen them do it on a CPU, so that's new. Anyway, we need to hit reset once. And so for the 1033 ABBA AGSA, I'm using the F5B BIOS, which is the only, like, well, is the last 1033, 1003 ABBA AGSA for this board that I could find. So anyway, also 3600 megahertz for the memory, so that's the same. And then we go to AMD CBS. Then we go to XFR enhancement, accepted, and we're just gonna blow this stuff up, right? And yeah. I'm actually kind of glad that Gigabyte doesn't bother putting actual restrictions on their PBO settings. Like, there's other boards which will stop you from punching in really ridiculous values, but it's just like the chip is not physically capable of pulling that much power. Like, there's no point it's like. It's the main that's the main reason I don't like power limits on a lot of hardware, where it's just like, look, the chip will pull as much power as it needs unless you're chasing some kind of efficiency numbers. It really, like, there's no point having a power limit. It just doesn't pull that much power. Like, it can't pull that much power at a given voltage and a given clock speed. There's a hard limit on how much power the chip can pull. So a power limit really doesn't do anything in that scenario. Anyway, so now we're gonna go 28 again, and hardware info starts up, and bam, we hit OK, and well, it's boosting a little bit more right now. Okay, now it's back to 4 gigahertz. Wait, does this one have it too? I guess it might just happen later then. Oops. Evidently, I didn't test this that much. That's why it was still at 444 when we got in. So we'll put it back down to 444 because I was expecting it to pull 240 watts, not 220. I guess it might also be because, you know, I might have to like fully reset the system, like power down. Because I'm not sure how the CPU, well, yeah, it should be fine. Okay, well, let's try 444. Because that was in there previously, and that did work when I tested it earlier. Or at least I think it did. I should have just made a spreadsheet with the results, and then I wouldn't have to worry about things working when I point a camera at them. Actually, I'm not even pointing a camera at them, but like when I just plug in the capture card or press record. Yeah. Yeah, see, this then it gets covered up and takes longer. Okay, now we're getting more boost. Okay, so this version of the AGSA also does it. It just does it at higher values, I guess. So I guess you could try fine-tune this again. Like, maybe try like 333 instead of 444. Because right now, like, we're hitting around 240 watts. Also a little over 1.2 volts. The chip is actually hitting the thermal limit now, or it's gonna hit the thermal limit if I keep running it for long enough. Yeah, it's pretty toasty. Also, like, the voltage here is even worse relative to the frequency. Like, AGS, like, the PBO is just not very voltage efficient. It likes to run, like, at least 50 millivolts more than necessary, if not 100. It's almost as bad as auto overclocking utilities on a lot of motherboards where, you know, the motherboard will preload like a frequency and voltage where it's like, if this didn't work, the chip would literally not be able to pass validation. So anyway, but yeah, so this older AGSA, it's not actually giving us any really, like, it's not, well, I mean, it's holding 4 gigahertz steady. But yeah, I wouldn't really consider this a massive win in terms of performance, but it's far more useful for gauging actual voltage limits than, say, 1004B, because on 1004B, it's just not going to pull this much power. Like, it's just never going to pull this much power. So here we can clearly see chip goes up to like 240 watts. And so if I wanted to set up a static overclock, I would aim to not exceed the, you know, voltage behavior that this pulls up, even though you can definitely go much higher frequencies than this at this kind of voltage. PBO is just really bad. So yeah, and that's been generally true with PBO for a while. It's just like the 3950X, I feel like, is the first chip where it's like, whoa, it's off by, like, it's normally off by like 100 megahertz, which is like, okay, no big deal. But when it's off by 200 megahertz, it's like, really? Like, really? Is there no way to get this a bit more accurate? Anyway, so yeah. Also, this vCore, I mean, that vCore reading is wrong, but this one down here is also very, very accurate. This one's actually probably more accurate than the SVI2 TFN just because it has more, I think it has more resolution. So, yeah. Anyway, so, you know, that's the point. So if you use 1003 ABBA, you get like 4,000, 1.2, what? Okay, well, the issue is it's thermal throttling at this point, right? Like, it's bouncing off that 95-degree thermal limit. So it's going to start, like, it's going to just free fall the voltage eventually. I need, like, well, 280 millimeter AIO. Also, the chip is managing to heat up the entire room. This room is not that big, and I don't have AC. Also, it's winter in the UK. I wouldn't be running AC even if I did have it. It's cold. So, yeah, so it's like 1.2 volts, you know, and 240 watts. So there. That's what I wanted to show. Is just like, yeah, if you're messing with PBO, the newest AGSA just seems to, like, well, the old one does it too, right? If you when I punched in 999 for everything, it did it. Which I think I noticed even on, like, when I first tested the 3700X, I think I noticed the same thing, whereas it's just like, yeah, if you punch in values that are just ridiculously high, the boost algorithm basically seems to break, and it behaves very strangely. But if you punch in just reasonably high values, then on 1003 ABBA, it actually works how you'd expect it to. It basically just, you know, it just keeps cranking the frequency and voltage until it hits some kind of limits. And in this case, it's the thermal limit because I don't have better cooling. But if you're on 1004B, it's just arbitrarily gonna decide to not boost anymore because screw you, that's why. Also, this is not the only motherboard that I ran into this. I've tested 3 other boards, you know, and yeah, every single one of them has a problem on 1004B, where if you just, well, the 230 PBO is the limit. Like, that's the whole issue, is just like 230 is not a high enough limit in my opinion. And on the older AG, on the newer AGSA, that like the X570 ITX board I tested does it, the Unify from MSI does it, this does it, I have a couple more boards I can test, but I'll be very, very surprised if they don't do this, because this is PBO behavior, which is literally, like, as far as I'm aware, that should be defined by the AGSA, and the AGSA is provided to all board vendors by AMD. So basically, if AMD screws something up, it's broken for everybody equally, which at least, like, that takes a lot of the guesswork out of which boards are better than other boards. But at the same time, it also means, like, you know, instead of having multiple, like, you know, instead of just avoiding, like, you just have to like avoid certain AGSA versions with this kind of situation where it's like, yeah, if AMD screws something up, then everybody's screwed. Whereas on, like, Intel's side, if like Gigabyte screws something up, or MSI screw up something, or Asus screw up something, right? It's only people with Asus boards that are affected, or MSI boards, or ASRock boards, or whatever. You get the idea. It's only that board partner that has a problem because it's their BIOS and their problem. But with the AGSA system, it's like, yeah, if AMD breaks something, it's broken for everyone. Which is like, if AMD breaks memory training, then it's broken for everyone because the board vendors can't do anything about that. Anyway, so yeah, that's all I really wanted to demonstrate here, is just like, PBO, no worky on one. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't work, but it might be intended behavior. It's just that the intended behavior doesn't make any bloody sense. Like, I would understand if AMD implemented like an idiot proofing system where it's just like, yeah, if you set the PBO limits higher than some arbitrary value, then the chip is just going to still hit the same power consumption. So let's say they decide that, okay, 220 watts is just the absolute limit of what will allow a 3950X to pull. So no matter what you punch in, as soon as it's higher than 220 watts, it's not going to pull more than 220 watts. And that would be reasonable behavior. But what it's currently doing is, like, the bigger the number you punch in, the less boost you get, which is just like, what? How does that work? Like, that's not an arbitrary limit. That looks like it's overflowing or something. Which initially I thought it was like an 8-bit integer thing where it's like, oh, if you punch in anything higher than 255, it doesn't work. But no, that's not actually the case. And if that was the case, Threadripper would have serious issues because it has a 280 watt power limit at stock. Anyway, I'm like, the room is actually getting legitimately warm, so I'm gonna like stop Prime because, like, I'm starting to notice the air temperature increase. Yeah. It's a small room that I test in, so it gets very warm very quick. Yeah, because now my idle temperatures are like ridiculous. So, anyway, yeah, that's it for the video. Is just like, you know, do with this information what you will. And also, like, I might be a bit hard on AMD. Like, I was being very hard on AMD with the whole, you know, it's AMD broken software, which, to be fair, I think they kind of deserve it. At the same time, I literally daily an AMD GPU, and I've dailied an AMD GPU since 2012. Like, there's not been an NVIDIA card in my daily system since 2012. And my daily system also has a Ryzen 7, 1700. This, like, I love the 3950X. I just think PBO is kind of dumb. And the newest version of PBO is dumber than the older versions, because they're all really bad about how much frequency they give you for a voltage, but the newest one is also just kind of dumb in terms of how it boosts as you raise the power, as you raise the limits, or more so than the old ones were. So, yeah, like, basically, I'm gonna get banned from r/AMD again. Not the normal AMD, the meme AMD subreddit. I'm gonna get banned from there again. I got banned from there once for complaining about AMD's drivers. Or overclocking. I think it might have been Ryzen. I complained about something with being broken and got banned. So anyway, yes, that is it for the video. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. And if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon where you can support me directly. There's a link to that down in the description. And then there's also the AHOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, posters, stickers, you know, the usual YouTuber merch stuff. There's a link to that down in the description below as well. And yeah, that's it for the video. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.